This is your country. This is AM 870, 100.7 FM, Tri-City's Top Gun.
Bluegrass, bluegrass, bluegrass! Keep your voice down, the Bluegrass Show is on!
Howdy friends, welcome to the Afternoon Bluegrass right here on Tri-City's Top Gun. I'm your Bluegrass buddy, Tim White. I'm here for the next little while. I'm going to be sending you out some good Bluegrass music, some old-time music laced with a little bit of comedy, and a whole lot of information. Give somebody a call. Tell them Afternoon Bluegrass with Tim White's on right now on Tri-City's Top Gun, 870 AM, 100.7 FM, and on the web at TopGunRadio.com. Butch Robins is in town. We're going to be talking to Butch Robins live, playing a little bit of live music here today. So anyway, hey, we're going to take a little break. When I come back, I'm going to have Butch Robins in here, and we're going to talk about everything. As I said a little bit earlier, my guest in the studio today is the legendary, and you are a legend, I don't care what you say.
The only and only.
Get up there real close.
Real close?
Yeah, real close.
Real close.
Real close.
All right.
Butch Robins is in the studio. And that's good.
I'm going to be like a rock and roll singer, slobbering all over the thing with the beater.
Turned you up. But good to see you, Uncle Butchie.
Good to see you, Tim. Good to be back down here. I hermitize up in Pulaski County most of the time. So.
Well, you came down here, it was probably been a couple of years ago, spent the day with me and my wife Penny, and we had some dinner. And
yes.
Really always good to get back and rekindle the conversation with Butch. I like talking to you.
Well, good.
Only one thing I like better than talking to you.
What's that?
Listening to you play that five-string.
Oh, Lordy.
And you brought it with you.
I've got two of them here.
Yeah.
One can't handle me.
Who'd you bring with you?
I don't really have them named.
Well, now, you told me that you should name your instruments.
Well, maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
Or it could be a contest someday, for all those guys that hang out in banjo hangout. Well, I'd hate for some of them to do it. Some of the stuff I've heard come back on me. And
I named my guitar and my banjo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Banjo is Maud.
Maud.
Mm-hmm. Guitar's Nellie. That's my grandmother's.
Okay.
And the reason I named the banjo Maud,
yeah,
she was the loudest of the two grandmothers.
Well, that makes sense. You should have done it that way.
Yeah, so it worked out good. But, hey, I'm glad you're here. What do you want to talk about?
Just whatever you want to talk about.
What have you been doing?
Hitting a golf ball and writing a tune or two every now and then.
I heard you playing a little bit of one when you were warming up a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear that one all the way through.
Well, shoot.
You going to do it now?
Here you go.
All right, what's the name of this song?
I think they called this one Ham Bone. This was...
But you wrote it.
Yeah, I went... a few years ago, I got on a spasm for about a month or two and just started writing tunes. And I was trying to... write different ways of playing the banjo. I'm just a banjo player. I don't really have any musical form affiliation. We talked a while ago, that's a magic question I asked you that we didn't get to because you was distracted by that computing machine up there.
Yeah, what is it?
And that was, what is the defining factor of any music form? What component of it defines it?
I don't know if I know the right answer, but you teach me.
Well, I think it's the rhythm.
Okay.
It's the underlying rhythm. It's the heartbeat that's added to it. We've got our metronome, which basically gives us tempo and pace. As an individual, that heartbeat that we give to it is the rhythm of it. And that way you could tell the difference between Bob Marley's music and Duke Ellington, for instance,
Right.
There's a defining factor between the reggae and the big band area and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it's basically the underlying rhythm of what's there. So that gets real complicated. I don't want to talk a whole lot more about that right now.
We only got 2 hours left in the show here.
Well, you got a lot of stuff to put in it now, so this is just one component.
All right.
Here's your tune called Ham Bone.
Butch Robins live in the studios here at the Tim White Bluegrass Show. Good stuff. Tell me, what that come from? Just one of the spasms you had? Is that what you said?
I started to tell you about it. I had a spasm, and I just started writing stuff. In the middle of the night, I'd be walking the floor with my banjo, and these songs and tunes started popping out of it, so I contacted a fella in Salem, Virginia by the name of Tom Ohmson. And you remember Tom, he owned the Flat Five studio there in Salem. You brought Jimmy Rogers' guitar up when I had the World International Bluegrass.
Is he still there?
Band. He's been there for 30 years now. I reckon he's going to be an institution till he falls.
Good studio there. Mm-hmm.
And he's a great fella. But anyhow, about 6 or 8 months after I'd gone up and recorded all these demos so I could at least get them off to the Library of Congress and get the copyrights on them, Tom called me up and said he had a little band together and they wanted to be my backup band. And so we played with that for about a year and a half. Up till maybe about a year or so ago, I guess, is when I quit out of that. But anyhow, they based most of their stuff. They were all sort of jam band musicians, and that ain't exactly my cup of tea these days. Most of the things I write and try to do, I try to get a little bit more organized than just free-form music.
Yeah.
I've got an idea of a sound I try to do.
Well, let me. There may be some people that lived under a rock, or just came in to bluegrass music. Tell the folks about your illustrious career, and I don't mean that as a joke. You've had quite a career.
Well, I got real lucky. As a young fellow, I was introduced to the banjo, I guess I was about 12 years old at that point, and started playing. And there was an old fellow named Elmer Harr, actually, used to have a trailer sales between Bristol and Abingdon here. And he came over one time and heard me play over to Asheville and became a friend of mine. I was playing at either the Junior Folk Festival they had in the spring or the one that Bascom Lamar Lunsford put on. Hubert Hayes did the one in the spring and Bascom Lamar Lunsford did the one in the fall. But Mr. Harr heard me, and not long after that, Jimmy Martin had moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and bought a new house, and Mr. Harr wound up buying him a house full of furniture. So Jimmy came up here to pick it up, and when he did, Mr. Harr called me up and said, "You got to come up here and meet this guy." So I've been playing a couple of years at that point.
How old were you?
I was about 14, I guess. Maybe 13 to 14. I don't really remember. It's been a long time ago. But Jimmy Martin sat with me and showed me how to play behind the singer, how to keep a roll going. This was through Christmas holidays, and I was able to be there with him for a couple of days, and he was, showing me the stuff like he had done back in those days, the "You Don't Know My Minds" and my walking shoes and some of those things, and how to keep that roll going all the time. That was something very important in his band.
He didn't like a chop.
He did not like chop rhythm on a banjo at all. Mm-hmm. So, and it's hard to do that. When every band that I've ever put together, I tell all the guys I want them playing wide open all the time, because we've only got 3 or 4 or 5 pieces out there we're doing. We need to make as much noise as we can. Now, the big trick in that is, how do you do that without stepping on somebody every way you're turning? Without stepping on your singer or the guy who's doing the lead work at that point, or the guy whose backup is that which is accentuating the lines, Like Kenny Baker played. Kenny Baker played the neatest little tags at the end of one line, and he'd take a singer right into his next line.
Right.
It was wonderful the way that he worked. Guys back in those days had a different understanding of music. It was like, especially guitar players. They were mainly rhythm back in those days. You had a couple of guys come along like George Shuffler, Don Reno, who played a little bit of guitar in what people referred to as bluegrass back in those days. It's a funny thing, I say people referred to it because they never referred to themselves as that. Mm-hmm. I asked people, did Flatt and Scruggs ever build themselves as a bluegrass act? What about Reno and Smiley? What about the Stanley Brothers? Until the festivals came along in Fincastle, those were country music acts.
Right.
And that's how they build themselves. But a whole different thing started when Carlton Haney got all the folks together up at Fincastle in 1965.
Sure did.
And basically all he was putting them together for was the Sunday event. He wanted to recreate the various bands that had been in Monroe's ensemble, through the years, and try to go back and do some of the classic stuff. He hired as many solos like Rudy Lyle. Benny Martin was a solo that came in up there that year. But any of the bands they booked had one member, generally, who had been in Monroe's band. But all of a sudden, two things started happening. One, Doc Watson got invited along. Ralph Rensler got him up there so they could show the folks what Bill had sounded like when he was with Charlie as a duet. But all of a sudden, from that point on, Doc Watson, rather than being part of the folk scene, was part of the bluegrass scene.
Yeah, and he really wasn't bluegrass.
And he was a rockabilly acoustic guitar player.
Let's go back, though. There's so much to talk about. And like I said, I love talking to you. Go back to when Jimmy Martin told you to keep that roll going. Let's talk about Butch
Jimmy
Robins.
Martin taught me how to keep the roll going, so I got to be big on that. And it wasn't long after that we moved up to, my dad became a school teacher in Radford, Virginia. And we moved up there where I could see Reno and Smiley on TV every morning. So naturally, I go up and visit them and become acquainted with them. And the next thing you know, Don Reno's teaching me stuff, and I'm getting to play on their TV show. Boy, I thought I was something then. Went over to the El Tenedor skating rink one night when the Stanleys were over there, and for some reason I wound up playing a set with them when Carter was with Carter and Chick Strickland and George Shuffler. So I just sort of got to know these folks. I got to know Monroe when he did the grand opening of the Melrose Shopping Center in Roanoke, Virginia.
That was near my house.
Carlton Haney hired him in there to do that.
I didn't know. I was a kid. I was very small, but that was 2 miles from my house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the only time I ever saw Bessie Lee Malden in the band. She was still in the band at that point. Mm-hmm. And Benny Williams with him that night, and Bessie Lee. And I remember he had this guy named Gene Roberts, who was a banjo player who had played for Chief Powhatan or somebody like that. No, what was that guy's name? It was George something or other from down in Richmond.
And you ended up later being in Bill Monroe's band.
Yeah. Well, somehow or another, he and my dad had talked about the whole thing, and the big deal was I was supposed to graduate from high school. Well, I got kind of heartbroken when Lamar Greer got the job with Monroe's band. At the first Fincastle Festival, he was trying out there. And, I was through with it at that point. I didn't even want to play no more because I wanted that job so bad. And I was 16 years old. So, anyhow, my dad sent Monroe a graduation announcement, and he hired me right out of high school to come play for him.
And what year was that?
1967. I worked the first Bean Blossom Bluegrass Festival with him up there, but I never did work the Grand Ole Opry then. I better keep that one to myself. Anyhow,
I'd like to hear it at least off the microphone.
All right. Yeah, well, I was extremely disappointed by what country music had to offer back then, as far as looking like a career that I'd want to be in, because there was no money, and it was hard work, and especially working for Bill Monroe was hard work. We worked around that park up there for a week before that first festival, and it was not easy work. I talk about it in a book I wrote a few years ago. I
read your book, yeah.
And talk about how he drug me out of the woods over there one time with a light pole, a pole that we were going to put up next to the barn, and he literally drug me, and I was 18 years old and in as good a shape as I was ever in my life, and here I got this 60-year-old man, 55 or 60-year-old man dragging me through the brush, with him carrying the weight of the pole that we had a hold of. So
it's amazing, people think of the legendary Bill Monroe, and if you know some of the inside stories, they did stuff like dig holes and work mules and mow grass. And
the farm that he had down there in Goodlettsville, I think Ed Mayfield and Kenny Baker are the ones that put the fence around that in the 50s, before Ed Mayfield passed away.
Well, hold on. I tell you, we got to do a little business. It's the nature of the beast here, and we appreciate our sponsors. So let's spend a little time with our sponsors. Talking to Butch Robins, banjo picker extraordinaire, one of my heroes on the 5-string banjo. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit and get him to play some more live for us. You're listening to the Tim White Bluegrass Show. 81 degrees if you're just tuning in. Butch Robins, my guest in the studio today, live and in color, and we're talking about this and that, but you're not playing with picks on today, Butch.
too damn loud. You got the delay on this.
Hey, you can get by with that, but don't get any worse than that, okay?
Like some of these guys used to have delays that they put me on. Anyhow, I just like playing like this a lot better. I think the banjo sounds better. I enjoy the sound.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
When I play with folks, where I got to be heard and everything,
But in a studio situation like it, now when you're recording on
I record
album,
both ways.
Do you?
I actually record something. Leon found out this about me years ago that I could.
Leon
if
Russell.
you give me a tune within 2 or 3 minutes of when I've recorded it, I can duplicate what I've done pretty much. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty hard to do with banjo rolls flying at you and everything.
It is, yeah.
So what I do now to bolster that sound, one of the things that Tom Onson at Flat 5 in Salem that I was telling you about helped me do is I would record a track with picks on and then go back and record it without the picks and we'd put them together and it just gave a beautiful sound to the band.
Note to note, huh? Note for note.
Yeah, I pretty much can.
Show us some more of your talent here. Here's Butch Robins live in the studio here on
Here's the theme song of The Straight Road.
Good stuff. All over the neck of that banjo right there.
Lee Highway Blues.
That was good stuff. Tell them about that banjo. You're going to switch banjos, it looks like. What about this banjo you're playing right now for us?
This is a Granada banjo that I keep. It's a Gibson banjo that I keep in a C tuning to play those. I've got a bunch of tunes here that I've sort of written that stays in that in songs and everything. So anymore when I go out to play, rather than be yanking on tuners all night long and everything. And plus it changes. You run the first string up by 2 frets, the second string up by 1, and the fourth string down by 2. So I have to put a lighter gauge on the first and a little lighter gauge on the second and a heavier gauge on the fourth to make it all work out.
How old is that banjo?
About 10 years old. Charlie Darrington got this for me just before he was killed at Gibson. He's a guy who rebuilt Bill Monroe's mandolin after it was destroyed with a fire poker and everything. And he had been the head of OAI at Gibson, and they had moved him up into the front offices. He was going to be the ones they were following Apple's model of they were going to put music stores in shopping malls back then, the way Apple had put their little computer stores out there and everything. Anyhow, Charlie was hit by a drunk driver going the wrong way on Briley Parkway one day on his way home from work. And he's no longer with us.
Yeah. Well, There's been several bluegrass musicians and country musicians die that way.
Yeah, Charlie was a great musician too. He was the mandolin player in the band 1946. I had a spasm where I went back to Nashville 2001, maybe 2002, somewhere along in there. And one of the guys that I worked for was a fellow named Dave Peterson, and Charlie was in that band, and I just found him to be a very jovial and nice guy.
Well, you're going to switch banjos, but before you do, it looked like that's what you were going to do.
Well, I can, whatever you want to do.
Butch Robins in the studio played. Tell about your stint with Bill Monroe. We talked about when you were 18, you played with him about a month. And
yeah, I wasn't there very long, but I got this job in this band. I wound up on a Leon Russell recording session. And when the sessions were over and everything, I'd gotten on a tear with this fellow named Les Blank, who was an avant-garde filmmaker who was filming all of Leon's work back in those days. And we wound up out in Tulsa, Oklahoma for some reason. And I couldn't tell you what it was. But Leon approached me and asked me if I'd put together a little band that could go out in front of him on one of his tours and just do a couple of tunes and do some of the stuff that was on his Hank Wilson's back record. So I didn't want to form no band. I don't like being a band leader. And I had a friend back in those days by the name of Sam Bush who had a group called the Newgrass Revival. They had just broken away from Lonnie Pierce and the Bluegrass Alliance. And I called Sam up and asked him if he wanted to go to work for Leon Russell. And he said, no, I've got this other band thing. I said, no, man, the whole band. He'll be working for him on the tour. And he said he'd love to do it, so they called Keith Case and made sure they could clear their schedule for 3 months that this tour was going to be. And I wound up going out with those guys. I told him the only kicker is you got to take me along as a utility musician because I want to ride. You know, I've never been on a rock and roll tour where you're going out and playing for 50, 75,000 people a night screaming crazy and, you know, a big-time rock and roll show back in them days. But anyhow, not long after that job was over for me, I actually quit before the tour was over and wound up going to Las Vegas to work for a while in the Harry James Field Harris show out there. And right before I got ready to leave that show, Sam called me up and said they were letting their bass player go and asked if I'd come in and fill in for them. And I wound up, I think about 16, 18 months maybe, as a bass player in the Newgrass Revival there. While I was in the Newgrass Revival, Sam encouraged me to listen to Bill Monroe.
Well, wait a minute, I'm confused. Where was Cowan at this point?
He ain't even with the band. Ebo Walker.
Ebo Walker, okay.
Was the bass player that they let go of.
I'm with you now, okay.
Ebo, he was a piece of work. Anyhow, Sam kept encouraging me to listen to Bill Monroe, and I said, I worked for him back a few years ago. I really ain't that interested. He said, no, forget about him and as a person or what you think about him and listen to his music. And I started doing it. So I wound up going back to work for him in 1977, and the band at that point was Kenny Baker, Randy Davis, and Wayne Lewis. And I stayed through the 3rd of July of 1981.
I've got, you know what I've got? I've got my treasure here, the music of Bill Monroe, 1936 to 1994. And on disc 4, cut number 10, Come Hither to Go Yonder, and it says on the banjo, there's Joseph Butch Robins.
Yes.
Let's take a listen.
Well, let's do. It's been a long time since I heard that.
back here. I was talking to Butch Robins off the microphone, and we're having a good time, aren't we, Butchie? Uncle Butchie.
Of course.
Yeah. Get up there in that microphone real close so I can hear you.
Get up real close.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
When you're
I'm talking to
talking.
my banjo here. I'll get back.
You were distracted by that banjo. Does that banjo have a name? You switched back to switch banjos.
This is my old banjo. I got this one in 1977. I had gone to work for Monroe on Labor Day weekend of 1977, and I got this over the Christmas holidays. A fellow, Gary Price, had sent it in to George Gruen to be appraised. He was in the middle of a divorce, and the judge down in San Antonio had required him to get a valid appraisal on all his instruments, so he sent this one to George Gruen. And Bill Kenner, I think's the guy that wrote the Kendalls' "Take Me to Paradise Tonight" or something like that. He wrote a bunch of those songs. He's from Texas. But anyhow, Bill told me about the banjo, and then George called and said that he had it down there, that I should come see it, and I followed it home. Mm-hmm. Ken Irwin sent a down payment for me until I could get back home and get a loan in order to buy the thing, and I went down there and got it, and I've had it ever since.
Can we hear it?
Yeah.
Pull that microphone down there a little bit toward me.
Well, I was just sort of thinking about what I could play. Give me a few minutes and I'll think about what I can play on this banjo for you.
All right, that's good. It sounds good.
I laughed last year. A friend of mine named Kurt Story, he's one of my favorite engineers in the world, and people, had called me to come out to do a little recording for him and everything, and I wound up getting up to these people, and they really wanted to play with some bluegrass boys. Really like some bluegrass music on this recording of mine. So I go in to do the record with him, and I'm thinking, here's going to be old standard stuff, and here's one of the tunes that we did, if I can try to do it.
You understand the neck of a 5-string, I can tell. I mean, you had your hands so spread apart. I don't think if you had to. I don't know how you get that kind of a wingspan on your hand.
There was a guy one of the best ones I ever saw at him for getting a literal reach was a fellow named Pat Cloud. Played banjo out on the West Coast, and they used to introduce him as Old Spider Fingers.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy had a left hand. He was like Paganini or somebody who had a 7 or 8 fret reach, and he was great.
Well, that's good stuff. I mean, that's not your normal banjo music right there that you just played. Butch Robins is in the studio, live and in person, and you took a break.
I took a break.
Did you get a drink of water?
Actually, I did not. I should have probably, but I'll do fine.
Cody wasn't helping you out back here, huh?
No, we were wandering the hallways here in this labyrinth.
Yeah, in the big studios here, the Tim White Bluegrass Show studios. Yeah. Are you having fun?
FUN, having it now.
All right.
Studio full of it.
Now we've, in the meantime, while we were doing our thing there, the news and all, you brought me a CD here called the Bluegrass Band's Shine Hallelujah Shine, Sacred Songs from the Early Days of Bluegrass. Tell me about this.
Okay, this fella came into my office in the early 90s and said he wanted to do a series of records like the old Boxcar Willie things for infomercials. Mm-hmm. So I did one for him that was called Once Again from the Top, and sold that on TV, and he started him a record label off the proceeds of that. And he came to me about 6 months later and asked me to do a gospel version of it. And I ain't very much of a religious person or anything, but I do think a lot about stuff of that nature, so I had to go make my peace with Bill Monroe and everything else, and it was a record that was going to be mostly singing, and I never had done anything with that before with voices.
Let me keep that thought. Keep that thought.
Are you going to another station break?
No.
Okay.
I want to make sure that folks understand you made your peace with Bill Monroe. You played with Monroe, and you'd get aggravated at him.
Oh yeah, I was not a very decent person when I quit him. I wouldn't quit. I did my best to get him to fire me at the Grand Ole Opry one night. I promised my dad I'd never quit him, but I was confronted by a road trip that I didn't want to go on with him. I was kind of aggravated about a bunch of stuff that had gone on, and I didn't act in a very gentlemanly manner when I dealt with him on a Friday night down there, and terms that would come to at the end of the fiasco were if I just worked 10 days out with him so he could find somebody else, then I could be on my way. And I said, well, you are letting me go. Let's make this clear. I'm not quitting you. And that was it, because I promised my dad I wouldn't do that. But as I said, there was some real ugly language used that night and everything else.
On your part?
On my part. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Monroe ever even realized what was going on throughout the whole thing. He was, at that point, he was doing a 30-day supply of Dilaudid every 10 days in dealing with the cancer that he had had. But I wanted, before I was going to make any kind of a gospel record or anything that had a spiritual tone to it at all, I wanted to go, that was one thing I wanted to go back and make amends for, and I did that. And then I got to work trying to make the record, and
so you went
real funny.
You went back to Bill and...
Yeah, I did it up at Ralph Stanley's.
That's great.
I went up there, and then I went by my dad's grave right after that, too. And it's the first time I'd visited that since he died. But anyhow, I got into making the record, and I started thinking about, what I was going to do. And I don't know where I could wind up talking the whole hour on this. I like it how each new generation likes to rewrite history. You all were talking about these museums around here a while ago, and just the whole Crooked Road thing. I did a thing with Michael Cleveland a few years ago, and I'll send it to you by email when I get back home, and called it the Straight Road. I don't know what they're doing with their Crooked Road down here. The only thing that I observed about it is most of the towns it runs through hasn't got a venue big enough to put on a program where you could even pay for sign maintenance. The actual trail for the cultural arts through this area of the Appalachian Mountains was the Lee Highway. It was the first paved road that went all the way across our nation. It went from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. It was paved in 1924. That straight road that runs between Roanoke and Knoxville, Tennessee, was the pipeline for the cultural arts throughout this area of the Appalachians, which are through there. And I wish these little local fine arts groups up and down this trail would kind of figure out what went on, that what supported Reno and Smiley and the Stanley Brothers and Bill Monroe and all these people, what put them on Route 58. In most cases, they came to Route 58 from the Lee Highway, right, which was a route pipeline. But anyhow, that's something else. And like I say, I've watched each generation rewrite history so much that I really don't. That's why I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the stuff that's said or read or anything else of these days, because I've seen how history can be changed. Mm-hmm. But when it came time to make the gospel record, I wound up auditioning folks for that, And I had given up. I thought I was going to have to go get folks like George and John Shuffler, who had both sung with the Stanleys, and Frank Buchanan and some of the old guys like that to actually sing some of this music, because I wanted it done with the shape note harmonies that Monroe used in his band, rather than the stacking your baritone and your lead and your tenor singer and keeping the baritone always under the lead. The lead singer that way has to alter his lines to accommodate that. So anyhow, I went in the studio. I wound up, Larry Stevenson had worked on the first project with me, and I just thought he was brilliant. I loved working with him. You could count on him. He kind of reminds me of Kazuhiro Inaba, my Japanese friend that you know. But Larry kept telling me that I ought to listen to Dudley Cornell, and I didn't know who Dudley Cornell was. I remember the Johnson Mountain Boys while I was still out and active, but I never had heard them or anything. And when I got out of the business in 1982, I didn't listen to anybody for 10 years at least. So I auditioned Dudley, and I found him to be one of the most wonderful powerhouses I'd ever played with in my life. Had a bass singer from out of Richmond, Virginia, that could shake the foundation of the house with his bottom parts that he put on everything. So we went in the studio, and I was gifted and blessed with a young fella named Ronnie Freeland as the engineer for this thing. He sat with me through 250 hours of mixing, where people had thought a tune was destroyed because they had hit a missed note and they didn't even play through the end of it, and we had to recreate parts during the mix because I only had these guys for 2 weekends. But anyhow, the reason I want you to play Get Down on Your Knees and Pray, that was all recorded around one mic. I was trying for the dynamic of, I didn't want matching voices. I'm not a great fan of brother voices. I like to hear each voice have a different quality to it that you can distinguish all the parts, and for the blend to come from the power that they put into it. So I think these boys achieved this, and the old boy that I really want to tell you about in this is Ronnie Freeland, Dick Freeland's son. Dick Freeland was the guy who started Rebel Records, charted the Country Gentlemen's Bringing Mary Home back in the early 60s. He was very influential in the recording industry up in the D.C. area, up in the Northeast, as far as bluegrass was back in those earlier days of the second generation of it. And his son, Ronnie Freeland, was absolutely the most gifted and brilliant analog engineer that I ever encountered in my life. And for somebody as brilliant as he was to be as humble a person he was, he was one of the magic people I met in my whole career, and Ronnie just passed away this last week.
I read about that on Bluegrass blog, yeah.
If you would, please, when we got finished with the cut of it, they finally achieved what I wanted vocal. I jumped out of the control room and ran around the building about 2 or 3 times, and I think Ronnie was laughing at me the whole time. But these boys really sing good on this, and Ronnie, I really appreciate your work. You are a brilliant, wonderful memory.
Go rather it be in a deep dark grave, and to know that my soul is safe, and to live in this world in a house of gold, and to know my God into my soul.
All right. Obviously, that was not the song we wanted to play. But
It was a 2 CD set, and I've got the wrong CD in the right box.
we actually heard Dudley Connell do the House of Gold. But
Yeah, there's another cut on the other CD of him doing House of Gold where he does it down in his natural voice. We do it out of the key of E, where that one was in the A right there.
now this is a 1 CD case.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying it was...
There were 2 of them. There were 2 in the
different
package. One was green, one was blue.
Okay, because I'm
Trim on the
gonna go
covers.
home and find it. I've got these. I just couldn't
Okay.
remember the arrangement.
Well, it's in the blue one. That's the green one there,
Uh-huh.
and
But you did all the arrangement even on that one we just heard.
yeah, on everything. I think there are 42 or 43 songs in the package.
That's quite an undertaking. Quite an undertaking.
I did it in 2 weekends. I did the recording, and then it was a lot of mixed time after that. It's like that thing you're getting ready to cue up there right now.
Which one do you want to play off this Butch Robins Grounded?
Oh, my
Center
gosh.
focused? We can play more than one, but if you're just tuning in, Butch Robins in the studio, picker extraordinaire on the banjo. We're going to get him
Can
play
you
live
play?
too.
It would be so darn long. It would take up a half hour to do it. Just play. Here's a mandolin banjo duet of Old Ebenezer, Old Dangerfield. What is that?
That's
6 or 7, 8?
Number 8. Let me get it queued up here.
And that was with Mike Compton. And right after this, the next thing, if you play anything else off of it, the Golden West that comes right after it.
All right, let's do that. This one's the Old Ebenezer Dangerfield.
Yes.
Right CD this time, I bet.
There's only one of this package, so I'm hoping so.
It's 80 degrees right now, 25 minutes past 5. Hope you're driving safe. You're just tuning in, my friend and banjo picker extraordinaire, Butch Robins. I'm enjoying the conversation, as always, with you, Butchie. Uncle Butchie.
Uncle Butchie.
Yeah. Yeah, so you still having fun? Well, make sure you have fun.
You're in, I'm having it. I think I learned from Don Reno's two youngest sons, Don Wayne and Dale.
Uh-huh.
Those boys right there were hardwired for fun. They came into this world that way. And I just worked with Dale out in Missouri here a 3 weeks ago, so it ain't all rubbed off yet. I'm still having a good time.
Yeah, you still... Hey, get that banjo back up.
All right.
Put the banjo down. What in the world's wrong with you?
I thought we was going to play records here for a minute.
Well, we're going to get back to the records, but let's do a little more live music here. Butch Robins live in the studio here at Tim White Bluegrass Show. And what's on your mind? What do you feel like doing?
I better not do it. I've been doing I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the bright blessed days, the dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors in the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also in the faces, people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies crying, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And then you could hot rod it like Blue Moon of Kentucky. I'll end it there. Because I think 200 years from now, when the dust settles on the music of the North American continent of the 19th century or the 20th century, that there are going to be two names pop out of the hat. And that'll be Bill Monroe and Louis Armstrong. Because just darn near everything in the second half of that century, you can trace directly to one of those guys' careers. Mm-hmm. And whether it's going back through Elvis and Blue Moon of Kentucky or what Carl Perkins had to say about him. You know, there's a reason the old man's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to go along with the Bluegrass Hall of Fame and the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame and all the other stuff he's in.
You talking about Bill Monroe?
Bill Monroe.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough the last few years of his life, I think that's probably, the thing you just played there was Old Ebenezer Dangerfield. I would like for you to play the next cut after that when you do one here in a few minutes, because this was billed at 85. A little less than a year before he passed away. What does it say? The Golden West?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be it. But wait just a second. Less than a year before he passed away, I was going to make, they had asked me to do a Butch Robins album. I make all my band records under the name, you know, when it's singing and it's supposed to sound like a real band and everything, I make those under the name The Bluegrass Band. I started that back in 1981, right after I quit Bill Monroe. I got Alan O'Brien and Ed Dye and David Sebring and Blaine Sprouse together in a band with myself, and we called it The Bluegrass Band. Had some attorneys from up in Radford funded the thing for us so I could run it for a little over a year. But when I started making records again, these sell on TV or on through the infomercials things with once again from the top, I just called those the Bluegrass Band. And when I was doing a record that featured banjo playing, those are always my Butch Robins records that I do. So I'd been asked to do this banjo record, and I got to Nashville and had a couple of fellas hired that I understand they didn't make it past Brown's Diner at 12 o'clock and the cold beer is there. They didn't show up for session. So the morning after the first day, when it was sort of a fiasco, I went out to Monroe's house and sat around with him and drank coffee and talked the way we had gotten used to doing at that point. And I told him, I said, Mr. Bill, I wish you'd come out to the studio and help me out. I said, I've had a couple of fellas lay down on me. I'm going to have to go back and overdub their tracks, and I got a bunch more stuff I need to record. So he looked around and asked whoever was there what he had to do that afternoon, and they said they didn't know of anything. So he said he'd try to make it if he could. Well, I showed up at the studio at 1 o'clock, an hour before the sessions were supposed to start, and he was already in the parking lot. And I got him. It's like I told Doug Hutchins when I got back in, he heads up all this Bluegrass Boy reunion stuff that we do. I called Doug up and I said, I got him. He said, what do you mean? I said, I've got Bill Monroe on 6 cuts of one of my records. And I said, if I never do another thing in my life, I've got a couple of things that'll let you hear the wisdom of age. Right here, what you're getting to hear is a man who is well into his 80s. And I was telling you, if you ever have a chance to listen to this recording, there are 3 songs back to back, or 3 pieces of music. One of them is Space Captain and Doing My Time, a medley of that. Then the old Ebenezer Dangerfield that you just heard, and then this. Well, it was real interesting, the one that's coming up called The Golden West. On Doing My Time, at the end of that, I had stacked 7 banjos on there, and I made it as rock and roll, loud and big as I could make that sound. Then we had that short interlude, and then What You're Getting Ready to Hear came on. The only difference was I took out 6 of the banjos and added an 84-year-old mandolin player. And the dynamic is every bit as powerful. This is one of the most, and this is the way it started in the studio. It wasn't clipped on the front. The only thing that might have been clipped on it was David Greer doing the count off. So here's a tune called The Golden West for you.
81 degrees outside. We're about 20 minutes in front of 6. I'm here with my good friend Butch Robins, and he's got his 5-string banjo out here. His Gibson Master Tone. Good sounding banjo.
Good old banjo.
Yeah. You're going to do us something...
I'll play you a Bill Monroe style simple fiddle tune.
All right, but before we get to that, you're doing all this intricate stuff that's not normally played on a banjo. How did you learn, or what's your background in learning like the chord structures and the finesse of the things, the notes that you get? How did you learn all of that?
I ran into this guy named Marshall Freeland over at one of those Asheville festivals over there, and he turned my dad and I on to some of the books about music theory, where I could learn how to make a 6th and a 7th and a major 7th and augmented 7ths and minors and diminished and stuff like that. And the rest of it was just trying to learn how to, it just started out with me just trying to learn how to play fiddle music and play the notes true to the melody that the fiddle was playing. You know, back when fiddle players really tried to play a melody. Mm-hmm. You know, you'd hear somebody like Monroe improvise on something. I'm going to play for you Sally Gooden that he used to do. Real simple old tune. Here we go. Yeah. To the melody. Mm-hmm. Well, Monroe would tell you when he'd get you to working with it, he wanted you to maintain the theme of that melody through what you're doing, but he said, now you play that thing down low there in the low register down there, and you work it way down in the high register, and then you work it back around itself. And that's how he'd explain it. Kind of like he'd come to you, I want you to play that song so it sounds like Christmas, you know. But anyhow, here's Sally Gooden, a version of it that I used to play with him. I think somebody put this up, Jim Richter, a guy out in Indiana, put this up on YouTube years ago. It's I used to do it and Gray Eagle back to back, but I'll just play the Sally Gooden one so we can get this longer tune. But here's Sally Gooden, a pretty straight ahead version of it, the way Monroe would have allowed me to play it.
Good stuff from Butch Robins.
Sally was a good one.
Yep, she sure was. You made her sound even better. We'll be back with a little more of the Tim White Bluegrass Show with my friend Butch Robins. Keep it right where it's at. All right. If you're just tuning in, Butch Robins is in the studio with his banjo. You got a Liberty Bell on your peg head.
Yeah, my dentist gave me that for being brave one day. He usually gives it to
kids,
and he said since I didn't whine about that root canal, he gave me one. So.
And you're I'm proud of that Gibson 5-string.
Displaying my bravery here.
Hey, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to your CD, Butch Robins, grounded, centered, and focused on Hay Holler Records from, it says 1995.
Yes, sir.
And you've been talking so much about this space captain and doing my time with Dudley Cornell. Tell us about it. Let's play that.
Well, that would be great. It's that's an old thing I heard from Joe Cocker. I didn't translate it very well, but we got through it. And doing my time, I rearranged the lyrics a little bit on that to where it was talking about this old rock pile the way we talked about the third rock from the sun a little bit later on. So anyhow, is there a CD in it? Yeah, we've been playing it. Okay.
Yeah, we've been playing.
You opened up that case. I had the wrong
I was
one.
looking to see you've this was that you on. It's going to be you on the banjo, Sammy Sheeler on banjos, guitar, and mandolin, Dudley Cornell on guitar and lead vocal, Marvin Cockram on acoustic bass,
yeah.
and Ronnie Bowman on bass,
Electric bass,
guitar, and harmony vocals.
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's a good bunch of them right there.
That is. You want to listen to it?
I'd love to.
Let's do it.
They're all good players.
Once while traveling across the sky, this lovely planet crossed my eye.
what Bill Monroe say about that? That's powerful.
That's a powerful one. That Dudley Connell is just a powerful, powerful singer and guitar player is what he is.
If you're just tuning in, spending the afternoon with Butch Robins here, my hero on the banjo. I got several heroes on the banjo, and you're one of them.
Well, thank you.
And that was off his Grounded, Centered, and Focused Butch Robins CD on Hey Holler Records, and that's good stuff. Sammy Sheeler and you doing some stuff, and then
yes, sir.
A lot of the stuff was you by yourself. But what I want you to tell, we've only got a few minutes left here, very few. You recently, you go out and you tour sometimes with Leon Russell, and you recently did the Bluegrass.
I don't really tour from him. He's got a whole touring band. Every once in a while when he's got something comes up that's sort of reminiscent of the old Hank Wilson's back country music things that he did back in the early 70s, I'll go out and do them with him. But most of the time what I do, I'm playing here in a couple of weeks somehow this over at Floyd at their Dogtown Roadhouse. I don't know what.
Yeah, I saw something somebody said.
I don't know about playing a listening. You know, I sort of do my performances like I do house concerts.
That's fine.
And
you don't doubt that, do you?
Well, I don't know how it's going to go over in a roadhouse. You know, they say there's a lot of folks that like to dance over there and other stuff. I played golf with a fellow yesterday that's a regular frequenter of the place, and they have a whole lot younger audience that likes to dance and hoorah a little bit.
One thing's for sure, you're going to find out.
I'm going to find out here in a couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Well, tell me a little more about the Leon. You just did Bluegrass Underground with Leon Russell.
Yeah, that was last year, and I did another little thing. I don't really talk to him that much anymore. He is just such a unique musical force himself. I mean, he's one of
my favorites.
He's a brilliant man. He had classical piano lessons when he was a youngster, but I didn't know until I went down there and worked with him this last time. And he doesn't really read charts. I thought he did that.
He just feels it all.
Well, it was funny. I had a high school principal one time that got all over me about being lazy in high school. He said I was, a little bit smart, and one of these days I was going to walk into a room where everybody in that room was as smart as me, and some of them was a whole lot smarter, and I would having a setback. Well, I went for years, and I didn't encounter that I knew of until I went into the studio with Leon Russell, and he was all the way across on one corner. We were at Bradley's Barn down in Nashville, and he was behind the podium reading off the lyrics to his songs, no headphones on, had Pig Robbins playing the piano on the thing, and I was playing a 5-string dobro. And make a long story as short as I can, there was a line of us up this wall, Bobby Thompson, Tut Taylor, Ray Eddington, and myself, and all these guys playing, and the music got done. We had done Uncle Pen, and when we went into the second chorus, I had made it an augmented 7th chord going in rather than the normal 7th when you go into the chorus. And we got to that first run through, and everybody asked him, he asked everybody, said, how'd y'all like that one? I thought it was pretty good. Everybody said, yeah. He said, yeah, it was right good, but I think we got a better take. Now, I've got that 5-string dobro, which is a thin body model of it, which we used to put a SM57 microphone in the sound hole to make it heard in a session. That's how quiet it is. Mm-hmm. Electric guitar, J.J. Cale, all these other acoustic instruments, drum kit. When everybody said something about it being all right and everything, Leon said, yeah, but I believe we got a better cut with us. And he looked around this bunch of musicians, and how he even heard it, I'll never know. He said, young man, you can leave that F note out before we go into the second chorus. I hit that note twice.
And he heard it both times.
And he heard it. He had no headphones on. He was not listening to a playback. And right then, the words of Jimmy Painter, one of these days you're going to walk into somebody, and that's what Leon Russell does for me. I am so intimidated being around that guy, trying to play anything. I write him a lot of my new music and everything just to try it out on him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's one of my favorites. If he doesn't read charts, how does he convey to other musicians?
He tells you exactly what notes. He tells you what notes he wants you to play.
It's all up in between his ears, huh?
And he hears this note right here, and he says, that's an F note.
He can just tell you.
He can tell you what the notes are. All right. You got another banjo tune? What am I going to play?
What I'd like you to do, Butch Robins, my guest in here, if you're just tuning in. And if you're just tuning in, I feel sorry for you. We've had a good time this afternoon on the Tim White Bluegrass Show. But what we're going to do, Butch, if you would, we got about another, let's see, we got about 3 more minutes if we can pick us out of today's show, do something really nice for us. And come back. Will you come back and
I'll come
talk
back.
to
When
me?
can I come back? Because I'm tore all up today. I'm going up to Gay Lakes after I get out of here to see a Japanese friend of mine, Yoshihiro Arita, who's just a brilliant musician, but he ain't got his act together. He couldn't get him a rental car because he left his driver's license.
You got to go
in Japan.
rescue him, don't you?
I got to go rescue him.
Well,
And when can I come back?
I don't care. Come back
you
next
looking
week.
back next week?
Come back every day. I don't care.
What's you looking like next week?
I'm good next week.
I think I'm good next week too. And when are you taking off? You headed out. You've got to get to the beach.
Yeah, well, that's not until September. That's not until September.
How many more weeks we got in this month?
It's going by. We got 3 more weeks in this month.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, let's get back together. Butch Robins in the
Next week
studio.
or the week after that.
We're out of as much as you want to. Hey, we're out of time. But, Butch Robins going to pick us out. Thank you for coming by. You're listening to the Tim White Bluegrass Show.
Are we done?
No,
Oh, shucks.
no, we're still on there.